Chris, you know. Swear.
I'll just know to bring Patty.
We are live.
Well, yeah, okay. Good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Government Operations Committee. It is 5:40 on October 2nd. And present are Councilors Leonard, I'm Councilor Trumbull, Councilor Fournier, Councilor Pelletier, Councilor Sprague, Councilor Yakabaga, City Manager's here, and we're hoping to be joined on Zoom by the Public Health Director. But
She's there.
oh, she's here. Hey, Patty, how you doing?
Hello.
Hi, we just started, and you've got the first item with the SNAP program with UNE.
Yes, so this is our SNAP program, which we've been doing for a number of years now. And this grant covers 4 people with their direct service. It includes food, transportation, incentive to participants. So the SNAP educators run programs within the schools and with children, and then also in the community when school's not in session.
Is this a 2-county program?
Yes, it's a multi-county program.
Okay. Any questions on this program? It's a one we've done in the past. Is there a motion to approve this order?
So moved.
Second, without any objection, this order has passage. And then next is the we've got the city solicitor here. Is Patty here for this one too?
Nope, Patty's bouncing off. Patty's leaving.
Just the solicitor. Specified event permit discussion. We'll give you some direction. LD 202 was passed. Was this just passed last session?
We're good from here.
Yeah, right.
I can move to a meeting.
So, hi. On July 10th of this year, the governor signed into law the bill known as LD 202, an act to clarify the requirements for adult use cannabis stores to transact sales at specified events. I attached a copy of that act to your materials. The act sets up a procedure for adult use cannabis stores to apply for a specified event permit from the State Department of Administrative and Financial Services, which would be a temporary authorization from the department for a cannabis store to conduct sales of adult use cannabis and cannabis products at a specified event. These specified events would typically be events which occur off the premises of the adult use cannabis store. One of the requirements of a cannabis store applicant would need to show the department in order to obtain a specified event permit is proof of approval from the municipality where the specified event will occur in order to sell adult use cannabis products at the event. So after the effective date of that statute, the city should be expecting to be receiving requests from adult use cannabis stores for municipal approval to sell adult use cannabis and cannabis products at specified events that may be occurring in Bangor. These requests could occur from places that have stores in Bangor, but they could also occur from stores that are stores that are elsewhere, and there are events that would be occurring in Bangor, and stores that don't actually have a location within the city. Under the current provisions of the retail marijuana section of the city's ordinances, the city does not have any authority to issue an approval to sell adult use cannabis or cannabis products at a specified event located off the premises of an adult use cannabis store. You should know that the proposed rules the department is in the process of implementing regarding LD 202 make clear that municipalities are not required to permit the sale of adult use cannabis or cannabis products at specified events. The proposed rules clarify that municipalities are free to restrict the sale of adult use cannabis or cannabis products at specified events, including prohibiting such sales altogether. In other words, the statute does not require municipalities to authorize the sale of adult use cannabis or cannabis products at specified events. And I've confirmed this interpretation with Maine Municipal Association. I also spoke with somebody in the Office of Adult Use, the Office of Cannabis Policy at the state who was not allowed to give an opinion on it, but I very much got the impression that they were in agreement with that interpretation. If the council is inclined to not allow such municipal approval for these types of cannabis sales, if the council did nothing, then it wouldn't have any authority to give municipal approval, and then these adult use cannabis stores wouldn't have any way of getting their state permit because they wouldn't have municipal approval, which is one of the conditions for them to be able to get a state permit. But if the council is inclined to not allow such municipal approval for these types of cannabis sales, it may want to consider clarifying in the retail marijuana section of the city's ordinances that retail marijuana establishments may not sell adult use cannabis or cannabis products off-site at a specified event. I think that would be more clear if it just said it, then people wouldn't be expecting to be able to get the municipal approval because it would say right in the ordinance that you can't. If the council is inclined to allow such sales, but restrict them in some manner that's beyond what the state restrictions are that are in the new statute, the council would need to amend the retail marijuana section of the city's ordinances to allow for municipal approval for such sales with the restrictions the council wishes to impose on the sales. And if the council is inclined to allow such sales of adult use cannabis or cannabis products at off-site specified events without any additional restrictions, I recommend that the council amend the retail marijuana section of the city's ordinance to so specify. So there's three different things you could do. You could do nothing. You could specify that they're not allowed, actually four different things. Specify that they are allowed with certain additional restrictions, or specify that they are allowed and with no additional restrictions. So we're here to staff request direction from the council on these issues.
Well, I'm not sure what the state envisioned in the past is what kind of events people would have these off-site permits for, but what's Council Leonard?
Yeah, sure. So I think regardless of which direction we go, we're gonna have to amend the ordinance anyway. I don't think not doing anything is an option. We've got to have some clarity on where the city stands on this. I know there are some cities, like I'm thinking of like Nashville, Tennessee, and a few others where they do allow certain ordinances where if there are certain events coming up, or not even really any events, like there are sometimes street vendors. You can just get your license there and sell like on the street. I'm not sure if I'm okay with that per se, but as long as well, I mean, I definitely want to open up to discussion, but as long as they're not near a park, as long as whatever the event is happening is the event holder is okay with having that type of retail vendor go to their event. If there is a request for these vendors to come to sell their product, those are definitely options I'm definitely open to, and potentially more. But that's just my first thoughts. I didn't know if anyone else had anything.
Council Yacobardo?
Personally, I would prefer to restrict them to sales in stores. When we talk about events, public events, it usually happens in parks. We have children, and I feel we have enough stores around town where people can get, marijuana from, and like that's where I stand. I think it's just I would go with restricting that to stores sales.
They don't have to look too hard to find a location. But that's my feeling too. Who else? Anybody? I guess we could just take it up and down. Is there how many people would like to see it not allowed?
Before we
any more discussion?
Yeah, I'm curious. Has the city been approached by any vendors who are trying to get a permit at this point?
No, I believe the effective date of the statute would be 90 days after the adjournment of the legislative session, which I think would be October 25th.
Okay.
So you all set?
Yeah.
The Council Sprague?
I agree with Councilor Yacobardo on this. I think right now the city has a whole bunch of difficult cultural and social issues that we're facing, that adding another one to the pot right now.
No pun intended.
Oh, nice.
Maybe it wasn't.
Daddy up for the
Maybe
day.
it wasn't that day. Doesn't seem prudent to me. I think there's nothing wrong with taking a wait and see approach to this and going back and be able to modify it if we see what some of the experience is in other parts of the state. But I think if I know that the population of the state has made it clear that they want to allow recreational marijuana, but I think that my sense is that the population of Bangor would not at all be happy about seeing parties in the field with sales of recreational marijuana being something that the council supported if it had an alternative. And I believe our alternative is to modify the language so that we can restrict it.
Council Leonard?
I'm completely fine with being more conservative on this approach and waiting to see how this law affects other municipalities in the state. And if we're a little bit late to the field party, I'm okay with that too.
So we don't need to, you just need a direction. It sounds like you've got it to come back with a changing language in a medical marijuana ordinance to not allow offsite.
That's what I was gonna ask a question about.
Yeah,
The wait and
that's the sense.
see, does wait and see mean?
No, we can always change it, but for
Yeah.
now, we want language that's not gonna allow offsite permits,
Okay,
right? Is that, I read this right?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah,
I think that's.
and then we can always, if we wanna change it in a couple of years or whatever, we can. But for
okay,
now, no,
thank you.
okay, thank you. Community connector update.
Yeah, Courtney O'Donnell, Assistant City Manager. I apologize. I really wanted to have a ridership report available for this meeting, but I got a little behind, so I don't have it. But I'll make sure to put that together and get it on the website and send it out via email as well. We are rebounding a bit from pandemic, but of course, we're not quite where we'd like to be. Transit Center is going very well. We continue to get great feedback. I will say the longer it's there, the harder it's become to maintain, if you will. We continue to, keep on top of things. We clean it daily. We always check in with folks, make sure they know where they're going and how to get there and things of that nature. Our warranty for the work is ending soon. So that means increased costs in terms of, when an issue with the door happens or something of that nature, instead of calling the company that built it, we'll need to get those folks on a contractor or on-call basis, if you will. But other than that, our staffing levels are actually for the first time ever, or since I've been here, say ever, that's a little dramatic, but in a long time, quite frankly, our bus driver levels are healthy. We're actually, I wouldn't quite say fully staffed, but we're pretty close. And it's been years to reach these levels. Of course, there's ongoing struggles at times when folks need to call out or be out for medical purposes and accommodating vacations and things like that, because as you know, buses need to be on the road, so the seats have to be filled. But overall, I think we're actually in a pretty good position. We're wrapping up our triennial, which is basically a review by FTA every 3 years to make sure that we're meeting all their requirements for the federal funding that we receive for the service. And we will also be doing an NTD report, which is National Transit Database Report, that has all sorts of fun statistics in it. It's due in October of every year. So kind of, I think, for a kickoff with the new council, next month, or it could be the month after, whenever the report's finalized, that will come back with updated ridership and other data from that report to share. So yeah, that's really it.
Questions, Council Leonard?
Yeah, thank you for the update. I'll be looking forward to the upcoming TFA reports and data. I was actually talking to one of the managers over the weekend, and we had a really good conversation in regards to the not the vouchers, the transit vouchers that you take to get on the bus. And
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, the names,
Yeah,
those tickets are.
that makes sense.
So, I think at some point, I would like to have a discussion in regards to ways to get around some of those issues that, that individual brought up, in regards to those tickets being, somewhat, hard to manage for drivers. And, I know we can get into a huge conversation about potentially like lowering the fare rate and like getting rid of those altogether, but that is a topic I would like to bring up at some point.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I think part of, we're super close to awarding our tech RFP. We're just working out some kinks before it goes to finance. I think that's one of the items to wrap up in the current council.
Okay.
And part of that is that mobile app, and ideally folks will be able to actually pay for tickets through the app and things of that nature. And I think Lori Lynn Scott, the bus superintendent, she's very aware of the concerns around the paper tickets, but also the transfers and the difficulty in managing those. We have heard anecdotally that some folks don't even bother to deal with them. They just use another ticket. Mm-hmm. And of course, we want a system that is fair and easy to use. So we're really hoping that tech piece allows us to implement more strategies and options for folks in terms of paying and using those tickets.
Yeah. Oh, good. Go ahead. I have one more.
Yeah, not on the committee.
Oh,
You can go. Yeah.
I actually, I was having a discussion with some of the folks from Food and Medicine. Actually, one of them is over right there, Cameron, and they brought up a really, I think, admirable idea to sort of help people use the bus system. They have this approach of if they are able to work with Lori and make sure that everyone is on board with this idea, which is if they're allowed to teach people how to use the transit system by teaching routes and other ways that the bus system can work, they would be willing to offer some volunteer services for education.
So that is fantastic to know or hear because Cameron's new, I think, to Food and Medicine. But actually we have a program in place called Ambassador Program. And that's with volunteers traditionally from Food and Medicine that do teach people how to ride the bus. And historically, we've had an issue with keeping volunteers consistently to do that, but we actually have a waiting list of folks that would love to learn. So I will reach out to Cameron because that's fantastic.
So I will say that I'm now an ambassador. Cameron is, and a few others
fantastic.
Are now too. So
that's great. Did you go through the training at Community Connector?
Yes.
Great. Fantastic.
So yeah, just want to update you on that, and just I'm sure if Karen wants to give you his contact information, he's more than willing to help out there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay, so it's awesome to hear that we have a healthy number of drivers. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. My next question is, what does it take to even talk or bring to the table expanding hours? I know it's a serious question. It's hard, but how can we start this conversation?
I think that's been an ongoing conversation for a long time. I think it's something that is certainly, I don't want to speak for Lori Lynn Scott, but one thing she hears frequently is, like healthcare, for example, their hours don't allow their people to ride the bus. I think traditionally, or the barrier, if you will, is the cost associated with increasing the hours, but it is something that we're looking at. Even with healthy numbers of bus drivers, we could not currently support expanded hours. But it's an ongoing conversation, and I think something that is generally supported. And I know as part of the climate action planning process, the transportation group I've heard has an immense support of transit and transportation, and recognizing that the Community Connector is really kind of the only game in town in terms of public transit. So there's a lot of support for this, and I think that we'll continue to work at strategies and ways to implement this. I think it'll be easier once we have pieces like the fixed bus stops in place, and then the tech piece. I think that will be a huge component. We still do a lot of things by paper, like our scheduling and everything is by paper. So we really need to kind of catch up a little bit and alleviate the burden on our staff in terms of right now trying to figure out how to accommodate that with schedules and routes and everything is a really large undertaking. So I think once we're able to get through some of our existing projects, that will be a conversation to be had for sure.
And I think truly there's a population that needs those extended hours. And in my current job, I see it all the time. People find employment, but they can't find a ride, back from work. And they don't make that much money to pay for Uber or cabs.
Yeah.
So I feel we encourage employment. We encourage people to go out and find the jobs, and people are excited to do it. But if there is no way of transportation, it makes it difficult for them.
Absolutely.
I don't really have a ridership question, but one, not even to do with this report, but a few years ago, we got the trolley and we didn't really have a plan for it. And I think we had some problems with it. Do we still have the trolley?
No.
We do we have two at one time? And we got rid.
We did,
both
but
gone?
the first one, the amount of repairs and
Right,
everything, it just
that's what I
became,
thought.
and then the second one, unfortunately, was in a catastrophic accident.
Right.
So we have no
So no
trolley.
trolley.
Although I will just say,
Yeah.
if the bus superintendent comes across one, she would be the first one to be like, hey, because even though, they're just immensely popular,
Right.
quite frankly.
Council Sprague.
Courtney, I think you and Lori are doing great bringing this stuff along. I mean, over the last year or two, we've heard about a lot of issues and challenges, and I think you and Lori are both responding to them very well. And I think we saw the safety report that we had to approve, and that was a lot of work. And I think that really advanced us, and to hear that we're almost staffed, is right. I agree with Councilor Akabagan, though. I think one of those future issues is definitely to continue the discussion, but it's hard to think about expanding when you're worried about whether we're going to have Saturday service or not, and doing some of these other things. So I think that's part of the questions about where do we really want to go with the community connector over the next year, say, and kind of discussing with this committee kind of what the desires are, or the expectations, and saying this is where we'd really like to be, a year from now, and to kind of tee that up a little bit. And I may have just forgotten when this was all presented, but just briefly tell us where we stand on the implementation of fixed stops.
Yes, so we did get a little behind. We are hoping to get sticks in the ground this fall, and there will be a 6 to 8 month transition period where we will do both. But we're kind of running in conjunction with the tech piece, and so we are really hopeful to at least announce and get the sticks in the ground for this fall. Although realistically, we wouldn't fully transition until probably late spring, early summer.
Yeah, so its target would be by the end of this fiscal year, say.
That would be lovely
To implement.
Yes.
I mean, just so that people can have something in mind, kind of where that's coming. So I think it's helpful to know that we're gonna start this fall, but it's also helpful to know when and where we hope to end up. And if it's, from my standpoint, I think working on implementing through the spring, makes a lot of sense. And it's not something that's easy to implement in the middle of the winter.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and actually we can't because the ground's frozen, but actually I think that's another item that's going to be coming before finance next time is RFP for contractor to actually put those in the ground, which we can turn around pretty quickly once it's awarded. So.
Okay.
Just a quick question about fixed stops, and I think we probably talked about this when we first decided to go this direction, but once you designate those stops, it's more than that. Right now, somebody can access the bus any place on the route. Are we having requirements for this bus system once those fixed stops, as far they have to be ADA compliant and they have to be cleared in the wintertime? So are they wheelchair accessible? There's gonna be more work. I think whatever it is, but isn't it gonna be more work for us to keep those?
So
usable all the time because they can't, they have to access it at those fixed stops, so.
Yeah, within reason, we would obviously accommodate to the extent possible. But yeah, that's part of the idea is put the sticks in the ground and get an idea of, does this area make sense? And then move along with infrastructure improvements like the curb cuts and things to make it more accessible. But yes, it just as with right now, if there's a shelter and things, they have to be cleared out and made accessible for sure. And in fact, I think we're required to do it within a 72-hour window, but we obviously try to do it sooner rather than later. So yeah, and just for anyone, you know, listening at home, the fixed stops, they are right now, they're based on all sorts of feedback we got and just the logistics of where they are within the road and what's safe to stop and standards around that. However, we do expect some will change once they're actually implemented and we gather some feedback, and whether that's from a bus driver who has to stop there and is like, this really isn't working, can we evaluate it? Or if we just hear from riders like, you know, you need to move that bus stop like 200 yards this way, we'll evaluate all that. And that's kind of the benefit of having both systems at 6 months. It allows the riders to get used to going to a fixed stop. And also allows us to evaluate, did we pick the right spot before we make any infrastructure improvements?
Okay. Other questions? All right, that's all we've got. Council Leonard.
Yeah, so but before we adjourn, I think it's important to reiterate comments that Councilor Sprague made at the end of the Finance Committee, which is what are some things that we need to accomplish at the end of this council year for this council to see. And elections are coming up, and I think one of the discussions that we really do need to settle on before November 7th is how we're going to elect a new chair coming up. That needs to be solved before we start that next election section, the election process. And on top of that, I think it's also important to, when we're deciding how that election process is going to be done, what are potentially also the duties of the committee chairs, and going into further detail of like how those are selected. Are they selected by the chair, or are they selected by a simple majority of the council, or whatever the process is? Those two items I think really need to be established before November 7th.
I actually have I found a couple of good examples from some other communities, and we're bringing that back through a council workshop versus a committee meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Council Sprague.
Okay, well, Councilor Leonard mentioned the first item that I was going to mention. I think this issue has been hanging out there since the meeting we had in June, and it's getting late. And to try to decide how we're going to elect the council chair, you know, at our next committee meeting, say, or at the one or a workshop before the election would take place, doesn't really give a lot of time for thoughtful consideration of how this should be done. So we're behind the curve, I think, in doing this. We also, in the issue of roles and responsibilities, what the role of the chair is very critical to who might take that position or who might be chosen by the council for that position. And that interrelates with the role of the committee chairs. And we haven't had that discussion. The other remaining issue from June is the issue of how many councilors can actually talk together at the same time without it being considered to be a violation of open government. And I think when we had the consultant in our June meeting, that was not at all clear that is well established, you know, in state law, what we can and can't do. And that's a holdover issue that we said we would come back to, but haven't come back to it yet. To the issue of establishing the agenda for the rest of October and for what would be the carryover to the next council. I know we can't tie up the next council totally because there'll be new members, but I think, you know, passing kind of a legacy list of things that are standout issues is important. We're going to have this discussion tomorrow night at the BED meeting in terms of what the agenda may be and what are some of the outstanding issues. So I'd encourage any of you who can participate in that to do so. But I think we ought to try to maybe share with each other what some of the outstanding issues are for this committee between now and the next committee meeting. There are a number of them. A couple of meetings ago, we introduced a development of a plan for homelessness. We don't have a process in place of how we're going to review what was proposed, edit it, and adopt something as a council. And that issue has belonged to this committee so far. Maybe it's more of a council topic in a workshop, but it's an issue that's kind of hanging out there. We've talked about needing to have, these aren't all in priority order, but I'll just mention a couple of more as examples. We've talked about needing to have an evaluation process for our funding that we did with ARPA. How the money was spent, the outcome was. We talked about working with the United Way to implement a process which they have for their grants. But we don't currently have any process in place for evaluating the results of our funding decisions. And I think that really shouldn't be like that. We should be looking at and scrutinizing whether people did what they said they would do with the resources that we provided to them and whether we achieved the results we hoped to achieve. There are some other things coming up, which we really haven't as a committee discussed. There's a planning process underway for the public health department, which is proceeding this fall, which will not be done until sometime in the spring. It's being done in conjunction with the accreditation process. And there's a community health needs assessment that's going to be developed as part of that. I don't know where in city government, other than this government operations committee, that comes back to, but that's pending. So that's coming out. There's a study that is going to be started, if it hasn't already, to using state money from the Maine Health Access Foundation to look at what a plan could be in Bangor to mitigate opioid problems. That's currently in process, but this committee hasn't really dealt with that. But that seems that the committee has ownership of that issue more than any other committee at this point. So these are just some of the things that I think are, Courtney mentioned the climate change discussions. And we haven't really done an update lately on what the climate change discussion should be. So those are a few of the issues which I see, and I've got some others. But I think it's important for us to not leave too many loose ends. There have been a number of things that have been discussed over the last year that came out of committee meetings and council meetings and budget meetings and ARPA meetings that are the purview of this committee here. And I think as we finish out the council year, it would be beneficial to have those summarized in a way that they could be carried over into the next year. City Manager Lori and her staff may have a whole bunch of things that they want to tee up for future discussion and say, some should be finished during this council year, like the discussion of how the chair will be selected with the next council, and others that would be teed up for December or January. But I think before the council we break up, we ought to put pen to paper and have a decent summary to guide the next council.
All right. Anything else tonight? All right. Thank you very much. That concludes the business.